We do projects in the area of acquired brain injury. We have done over the last 20 years. Acquired brain injury, again, as it says, is quite an interesting area. Most of us as individuals may have an accident, we may have something that happens to us that suddenly causes brain damage, and that changes us almost as a person. We also know that damage to the brain tissue can actually create different mood changes and swings in individual across a variety of areas. So often the kind of behaviours that staff report to us that we have to manage with are quite short, explosive behaviours. Very much episodic in nature and very intense. So our approach to applying the Low Arousal approach in applied brain injury involves, again, looking at how we interact with people very carefully, trying not to be judgmental. Quite often when a person becomes hyper aroused, they will say things that are quite abusive, they will shout, they will get very upset, they might even get physically violent. But actually it's very likely that that same person will almost literally forget that same behaviour is 10 minutes later. So how we often train staff to understand is to be empathic, to manage that crisis and try not to be judgmental. Really focus on the fact that that individual is not processing information properly. And key to that is understanding that any kind of stresses that affect those individuals is going to make extreme behaviours more likely. We've also found in our own work that quite a lot of the things that people encounter in those settings tend to be much more about intense threatening behaviour and extreme verbal abuse. Those are areas, again, that require staff tolerance to working at, and particularly, for example, in zero tolerance cultures that are created around the world, it actually puts people in the front line in a very paradoxical position. We like to make it clear that you are supporting someone with acquired brain injury. You are not supporting just your person in the street who's come in, say for example, to an A&E department. Therefore, we must see again the perspective of our managing behaviours from the perspective of a person who may have short-term memory problems, a person who may actually become quite distressed and may not even always be that aware of it. And actually, in some cases, I've worked with individuals who are very, very remorseful after they become quite challenging or even aggressive because they don't necessarily have overall control over those behaviours. So for us, working with people with acquired brain injury is actually easier to apply a low arousal approach than some of the other fields that we work in.